Views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the Society of Massage Archives. These interviews and commentaries represent the recollections of both the hosts and the guests, and as such, are subject to the occasional slight inaccuracies. The content here is for informational and educational purposes only. You should conduct your own historical research when determining the veracity of any of the statements made within.
Greetings and welcome to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives, where we delve into rich tapestry of massage therapy's past, explore its evolution, and share the stories that have shaped this vital practice. Today is Monday, January 27th, 2025. I am your host, Kirby Clark Ellis, and I'm joined today with Pete Whitridge. Pete Whitridge has been a licensed massage therapist since 1988. He teaches his myofascial components of pain workshops, Florida required courses, business building classes, and research literacy courses throughout the country. Pete completed his 4-year term on the Florida Board of Massage Therapy, serving 2 years as chairman. Pete has been a faculty member at massage schools throughout the nation, including Gainesville, Florida, Melbourne, Florida, Costa Rica, Des Moines, Iowa, and Asheville, North Carolina. He is a frequent speaker for AMTA and FSMTA chapter meetings, as well as national conventions for AMTA, FSMTA, and FCA. Pete has received multiple awards for his service through the profession, specifically 2004 and 2016. Pete is a founder and past president for the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education. He has dedicated his career to helping establish high standards in massage therapy education. He currently serves on the Probable Cause Committee, PCC, for the Florida Board of Massage Therapy. Pete is also an accreditation team leader for the Commission on Massage Therapy Accreditation. He currently lives in Fort Pierce, Florida, with his wife and editor, Lee. They travel frequently, and Pete is available to provide classes in your area. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirby. It's so great to be here with you.
Yes, it's excellent. And I'm really excited to jump into this conversation and learn more about your history and your thoughts on where we are in this profession.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I'm so grateful to you and everyone on your group that are trying to start to hold the history. I happen to have a degree in history and political science, so I think it's just a beautiful thing for our field.
Oh, I didn't know that. That might prove to be useful someday. To our conversation today, take me back to 1988 or 1987. Can you tell us about your and what
Sure.
massage
Yeah.
therapy?
So I actually started getting massages when I was 17 years old. My mom lived in Santa Fe, and so my very first massages were very beautiful massages. You know, people would really take care of you, keep you warm. And I was a whitewater raft guide on the Rio Grande, and so every week or every couple of 10 days, I would get a treatment to kind of help my whole body. And then I stopped being living in New Mexico and moved to Florida. And people would say to me, "Oh, well, what are you going to do in Florida?" And I would say to them, "Well, some of the therapists that I went to had gone to the Florida School of Massage, so maybe I'll go to massage school." So we moved to Florida in 1986. I was involved with some restaurants. I'd always been a chef, and food never ends. So at one point, Lee and I just said, well, maybe we should go to Gainesville and go to massage school. So we did that in May of 1988 and took the summer class. We actually traded our house at the beach in New Smyrna for a house out on the Swanee River, which is about an hour from Gainesville. And every day we drove into town and went to massage school. And at some point, my wife started working at the school. She was involved. We were doing work study. So Lee also became a massage therapist in 1989. So both of us are massage therapists. Um, and after about a year and a half, I actually got the opportunity to teach CPR and first aid at the massage school. That was one of the things I did um, as a student in high school and did trainings for whitewater raft guides at the beginning of the season for CPR and first aid. So I got that, great privilege to just start teaching students at the massage school. Then all the rest is history.
Um, um, so if I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like um, perhaps you were receiving massage in New Mexico before they had their licensing. Because it looks, from what I understand about it, sometime around the early 90s in New Mexico. Does that sound accurate for you?
Yes, yes. Most of the people that were providing therapies in Santa Fe, Taos, didn't need a license. There were some very good schools in Santa Fe, Jay Shear School and the Albuquerque School. And so people were really doing human development and really working with people for therapy and for self-care and for personal growth. And for me, it was really for pain relief. Working, doing rafting 7, 8 days a week, taking a lot of people down the river. It was really helpful to get my body cared for. Um, and so for me, when I came to massage, I was just kind of naturally drawn to people with injuries. But my practice has evolved and changed over the years. But yeah, licensure wasn't really something. And even in 1988 in massage in Florida, um, that we weren't even called massage therapists back then, that we were called masseuses and masseurs. So, and then it changed just as I came into the field, and being called a massage therapist instead of a masseur was interesting as well.
Hmm, gotcha. Yeah, a lot of people perhaps maybe don't realize it, but they might be more aware of the fact that Ohio was the first generation to
Mhm.
massage therapy, but Florida is right on their heels. They're the second in the nation in the
Yeah.
field. Did you have an interest in, was massage therapy school something you were thinking about before the move to Florida?
Well, yeah, I was kind of open, mostly because of the people who'd given me treatments. And I had always been pretty good with my hands. My dad actually really liked to get, his back worked on, and so he would encourage me to work on his back. And I think I know different people have learned how to do massage from the original massage book, um, the book of massage. And so when I was in college, that was something that I had at one of the apartments that I was living in. And I think that touching people in a safe and beautiful way was always something that came in handy. Um, I had people who were on trips who were injured, and I was an EMT, so sometimes we could just kind of work out those muscles and help them get some sleep. Um, but really for me, I was kind of like a little dream, like, oh, well, I'm going to be in Florida. Maybe I could go to that school. And then it really did come true. And in fact, I actually became the director of education there eventually. Started teaching CPR first aid, and then uh, started teaching anatomy because I was an EMT and could teach different sections. And then, was an apprentice as a bodywork teacher. Really spent time in the classroom being a TA, and then spent 27 years really being at the massage school, director of education. Then stopped doing that and moved on to a sailboat. My wife and I really love the water and travel, and so I still stayed in association with the school and could go there. I would teach a section. I would teach a month at a time, and then be free to go and do other travels. So I've always maintained a relationship with the school, especially through CompTA, through the accreditation process. So we'll talk about at some other point too.
Yeah, of course. So tell me, Pete, how long does that have you practicing massage therapy?
In May, it will be 37 years.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
must think about it for 36
Mhm.
years.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do. And even when we lived on a boat, there were times and places where I would meet people who had injuries. So you always have your hands. You don't need a table. Um, I love to teach because I'm a CE provider as well. So, even when I see people who are injured or have a knee problem, I'm not necessarily like, oh, I've got to fix you. I just, here's some ideas for you. Um, because it's about a relationship for me, really. Um, and I just think that over and over, throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to have a practice. I've had a practice in a beauty salon. I've had a practice at the massage school. Currently, I have a practice on Thursdays down in Stuart, Florida. It's about 40 minutes from me, and then I have a practice in Vero on Fridays, where I have friends and colleagues who don't use their room on those particular days, and they've invited me to come and use that particular space. And because I teach continuing education classes, it's kind of helpful for me. I don't. I can kind of recover on Monday and Tuesday from teaching. I just got back from Sarasota, Florida, teaching a workshop, and so it's nice to go to class, recover, do the paperwork, and then Thursdays and Fridays are busy.
Yeah, excellent. So you spend quite a bit of time traveling between those different
Mhm.
locations
Mhm.
providing therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and for me, uh, the travel time is actually just kind of quiet time. And I'm going down the island, so I have beautiful scenery to see, and it's just kind of special. And a lot of times on Thursdays, I talk to my mom. My mom happens to be a massage therapist too. So when I was in massage school or taught at massage school, she was living in New Mexico and had gone to the Naropa Institute and had done a bunch of polarity therapy and realized that if she really wanted to be a therapist, she probably should go to massage school too. So my mom went to massage school in Gainesville. My little brother, who had done massage even before me in Hawaii, wanted to get his license. He was going to live in Florida, so he came to the massage school. And when my mother-in-law turned 70, we actually sent her to massage school. She retired from being an executive director at the Orlando Dental Society, and we gave her the gift of going to massage school when she was 70 years old. And
Nice.
she continued to be associated with the school until she was 92 years old.
Wow, that's a whole gaggle of y'all. Like
Yeah.
school. Were you the first in the family to do that then, Pete?
Well, actually, Jeffrey, my little brother, had gone to Hawaii. He was a diver. And when he was in Hawaii, he went to massage school there. And then he realized he didn't really like touching people as much. He actually is now a clinical dietitian. He works at the University of Chicago in a oncology department, doing some like outpatient, like food is medicine kind of thing for people, and doing trainings with people. But so he was the first one, and then myself, and then Lee, and then my mom, and then Lee's mom.
Just a whole checklist.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you, now I'm just curious, personally, is there
Mhm.
is there a dynamic of having a family full of massage therapists like that? What is that like, if you could describe it?
Mm. Well, we all have a kind of a similar language. We're body oriented people, so I think that's really helpful. And at the Florida School of Massage, where I taught, and we all went to school, we were really focused on good communications, ethical practice, and really self personal growth. So I actually have my mother-in-law's journal since we were doing this class. She had a little journal that she went to school and wrote in. So sometimes this is just sitting in my office. So sometimes I just pick it up and kind of helps remind me of her. She's no longer here. But my mom is 86 and she's had different injuries. A year or two ago, she actually fractured her sacrum, and my brother and I went and spent time with her. And, so, you know, touching and teaching and those kinds of things are really important part of the life. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you for sharing that, Pete.
sure, sure.
Um, have you only always been licensed in Florida then, or have you been licensed in other states?
No, I've only been licensed in Florida. I've helped many, many people around the country get licensed in their particular states because of the school and because of my role. So I'm very familiar with lots and lots of regulations in states, and so appreciate that process that we've gone through. I helped start a school, the Finger Lakes School of Massage in Ithaca, with some dear friends. So the New York requirements are very quite extensive. Um, and my friend Joe Burkana, who is in Colorado, the Colorado is very recent in having licensure. So that's its own story. The I guess they call it DORA, Department of Occupational Regulation or something. And then, we have still friends in like Michigan where, there's a Michigan law, but it doesn't always get enforced, and or each city is a little bit different, or and then of course Minneapolis, we've been there many times, and I would love to have a license in Minnesota, but the legislature can't quite figure out how to do that. So
There is still time.
yes, yes. Well, and there's many people who are very invested. Carrie Palava is very, very invested in, having licensure and, Asian body work being included and all that. So, yeah. And there's still a few states that don't have licensure, or, the licensure isn't necessary for some particular reason. And, as somebody who is involved with discipline, I think it is. I think that there's people out there who um, are unsafe practitioners.
Excellent. Um, so let's talk a little bit more about your entry level education, Pete. Remind me, where did you say
Sure.
the Gainesville?
Yeah, I went to the Florida School of Massage in Gainesville, Florida. Back at that time, the program that I went through was a 500-hour program. It was kind of a summer program. And then they also had a 625 or 650-hour program. So that really included, we did a lot of hydrotherapy. Back at that time, we just changed out of having colonic therapy as part of the licensure process. It was optional for people. You could take class and take training. Many of us actually received colonic therapies as practice for some of our colleagues, friends, students. And then we had a pretty great owner, Paul Davenport, and he was very good at teaching anatomy and helping people understand the big picture of why are we learning about cells, these muscle things, that they're connected to this brain thing, and then of course we went through a whole variety of different types and styles of massage. Um, so Swedish massage was the foundational piece, but the basis of the whole school was structural integration. Lee Joseph and a variety of the instructors were actually kind of the East Coast people who were doing structural integration. So even when I went through school, we had students who were coming back to do training to do the certification for structural integration. So we did polarity therapy, neuromuscular therapy, a broad experience in reflexology. We had a teacher who was very, very involved with sports and athletics. So we could go and be involved with the athletes at the University of Florida. Um, Many years ago, the school was owned by Benny Vaughn as well. You've heard of Benny Vaughn, and people speak highly of Benny Vaughn. Well, Benny was one of the original owners of the Florida School of Massage, and then it sold that to Lee Joseph, and who then eventually moved to Hawaii and sold that to Paul Davenport and his wife Josie. So, and then, a really big piece of the program was what we would call um, communication skills. Every Friday, we were doing personal work, communication work, personal growth work, to really have those skills of helping people. Um, as a therapist, there's so many things you can do, right? You could just make a massage be a job, or you could make massage be your life practice. And so different people came to school for different reasons. Sometimes at that time in the 80s, people were really doing it as a second or third career. Oh, I was in this career and I was doing this, but I was unhappy. And so mature student comes and they're 38, 40 years old. They want to do something different. Um, I happened to be young. I was 27, I think. And um, but it had but been an EMT and had run businesses. And so for me, it was really like I wanted to do it because I felt like I got benefit from it. And then I felt like it was good skill to have an income. And then for me, it was just a beautiful, we thought we would actually go back to New Smyrna Beach, go back to the beach, have a practice, maybe work in a chiropractic office. And Gainesville never really let us go. Sometimes people say, oh, I want to live in Gainesville, Florida. And they're like, oh, I want to live in Gainesville, Florida. And it doesn't always work out, and I think that happens lots of places. We found a house, work occurred. I was working in a 4,000 square foot beauty salon where we did hair replacement and cosmetic makeup after post-surgical, facelifts and different things for women, manicures, pedicures. And so both Lee and I worked at that location. We split the week, and so we both had a practice there. So to me, the program taught me to be good at business, you know, because I'd already been good at business, but it also, gave me skills that like I could work on somebody who was injured, or I could work with somebody on an energetic level who needed calming in their nervous system. Um, and that seems different now, seems very different that, students are kind of taught in a different way. Not bad, not, better, not worse, but in a different way. It's much more an education business, not just a vocational school.
Interesting. Gotcha. Pete, I'm curious. A lot of people will cite like the 90s as like this huge renaissance kind of era for massage therapy.
Mhm.
Certainly, a lot of states got their practice acts around the 90s, early 2000s. What was the perception like as massage therapy being um, really where you could get a solid career going at the time when you started?
Yeah, yeah. So in 1988, 89, we had in the program maybe 38 students in my class, and we were divided in two. So we were actually like 18 in each class. By the next probably 3 years, we were having 60 student enrollment, and we were dividing those classes in two. So we were doing three programs a year. So there was a big push or big, like people wanted to go to massage school. Um, the Finger Lakes School of Massage up in New York was in very high demand when they opened up, and 40 students, 50 students at a time. Um, a variety of my friends all around the state would say, "Yeah, I have many fewer students now than I did back in late 1990." Um, and part of that I think is well, we've had a variety of things happen, right? Like healthcare is different. How people actually can afford things seems to be a little bit different. Um, Schools became education um, businesses. And so what that meant is sometimes people went for Title IV funding, student loan programs, things like that. So yeah, I would say, there was a time where, people could say, oh yeah, $10,000 for massage school. We can do a payment plan with you. You'll get your exam and you'll take your test and you'll have a practice. I think there's a tremendous demand for massage still. It's just a matter of, are there schools that really help people feel like they're getting exactly what they want?
Gotcha.
And sometimes there are great schools, and sometimes there are schools that students come and they're like, huh, I could have done nursing or I could have done something else. Um, but that's kind of what's happened in our field too. And then I don't think people are as touch oriented since COVID. If you look at the field of yoga, just, yoga practices, people aren't able to make rent to do a yoga studio anymore. So we're less touch oriented, more individuated oriented. And as well as I do, Kirby, that telephones, phones, I have one here somewhere, give us more isolation. You know what I mean? People are entertained by a phone, and so they're not as interested in being in a relationship with someone. When you're in a small room with someone for an hour, you're not supposed to be talking too much. You know what I mean? You're supposed to kind of help that person, orient to just being inside their body. And so I'm not sure that's of interest to some people. Or they go to massage school and they learn stuff and then they realize, I learned a lot, but that wasn't my field. I was talking to a lady recently who I think is wonderful, and she's an organizer. And she came in and she was a fitness trainer and she was very excited about massage. And then she realized, like, wow, it's much too intimate for me, as a woman, right? It was just much too intimate. Too many men wanting something that she wasn't able to provide, mostly didn't want to work with men. And she was very good at like going into people's homes and being intimate with them and helping them organize their house. So she said she learned so much at massage school about herself, and now she uses all that skill in something that she's got to hire 5 or 6 people to do the work because she can't do the work. So sometimes I think massage school is like a finishing school, like, oh, I need to learn about my body.
Yeah, it definitely, or at least my experience, is it teaches you quite a bit about yourself in massage school, more than just, getting your basic education that you have to meet your
Yeah.
requirements. It teaches you about yourself, I think.
Yeah,
So it sounds like the Florida School of Massage that you attended had a staff. It wasn't just one instructor providing the entirety of your lessons, right?
that's true. That is very, very true. Um, at the massage school, when I was there, we had 10 faculty of 10 with some adjunct. As we got bigger, when I was the director, we had almost 35 on the staff. So what that meant was you had a whole variety of different faculty members who were in the classroom with you. If we had a class of 30, 2 classes of 60 in the morning, there would be 3 instructors in the class.
Wow.
Okay, so that you had a lot of over supervision, feedback, support. Um, and this is one of the things that in the field, right? Someone who gets hired as the director of education, not only the director of education, they're the deliverer of the curriculum, not just the massage portion, but the anatomy portion, the hydrotherapy portion, the laws in education. Um, and so this is again one of those reasons that sometimes I think people come into the field thinking, oh, this is going to be a health practice. And what they realize is like, it's also kind of a business.
Right.
It's a business for somebody to make a business. Um, and there's so many wonderful owners. We're in a world where I have such good friends who are owners of massage schools and care so much. And then I have folks who they really care, but the bottom line is they've got to fill their curriculum with people in the seats. And so sometimes the recruitment, the screening of students, the appropriateness of students, um, kind of falls by the wayside. And I see this at the board meetings when I go to the board of massage meetings. People come in and they have a history, and some things are, incidental. It's just something that's on their record. But others are like, yeah, they told me I could get a license, and I just can't believe that I'm sitting here in front of the board and have to tell you about this. And the field is really, people are vulnerable. They have their clothes off. They're in a small dark room, and whether you're in a massage envy or someone's private clinic space at a salon, there's private, confidential things that are happening for people. Um, I just taught a workshop this weekend, and we had just a wonderful little group. And one of the longtime therapists who's been come to my class for a long time, he shared some really, really personal information about his health. He's 65 now, and he wouldn't have any problem with me saying this, but he shared about his um, prostate health care and how he was able to really care for that. And he'd actually had some surgery for that. And so, the women in the class were like, wow, I hadn't even dreamed, that that could be something that you could actually work on your own pelvic floor and, post-surgically and things like that. And we kind of missed some of that of, like what is massage? What could it be? And it could be a super, movement function, rehabilitation for people. And I think we start seeing that in the DoD, right? We've got the Department of Defense really, pushing to have massage really part of the field, of taking care of the veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a major thing going on that we see
Mm.
right
Yeah.
now. We talked a little bit, or you mentioned the massage book, iconic, historic. Were there other textbooks that were specifically used in your entry level education during the late 80s?
Yes. Yes. So many people have seen Francis Tappan's book with the little fingers, with one of the original covers. Tappan's book was really a big seminal book in our field. Eunice Ingram's book on reflexology,
Okay.
Stories These Feet Have Told. That was actually one of the books that we had. Um, the massage school that I went to, we actually had a lot of um, mimeograph booklets that we put together. So the NMT portion of the program had diagrams that were created by one of our work study people who was an artist. And then we had, session notes and things like that. And I've probably got 10 or 12 different one of those in my library sitting behind me, because there weren't a lot. There wasn't a lot. So I would say Tappan was a standard book. Um, the anatomy books were kind of college anatomy books. So then they had to be supplemented with also some kind of a handout that kind of made it relevant to massage. So we actually had our own AMP notebook. We also had our own AMP or kinesiology notebook. And those were things that, depending on how you presented it to people, were made it so much easier, right? Say, see, here's the college level book. Here we're going to read in chapter 6, and here's kind of a condensation of chapter 6 for you to kind of really apply it to yourself. And so the kind of the combination of the two. Um, and I'm trying to think. I would say that there was a book. That you probably are aware of from Ram Dass called Be Here Now. And there's also one called How Can I Help? And so those were books that we actually read and paid attention to, right? Be here now. Uh, how can I help?
Yeah.
And so those were really foundational for us. And one of the women who was very involved with the communication skills was actually a colleague of Fritz Perls, and so she was our Gestalt therapy instructor and really helped us do that the kind of work that was really integral to what I would consider human potential and human awareness.
Sure, got you. Um, does that kind of fit in with Gestalts? Does that kind of fit in with you mentioned structural integration earlier? Um,
Mhm.
okay. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And like Fritz Perls, like I would say like, people say, oh, Esalen and the Rolf Institute or the Boulder College, at that time, the East Coast was the Florida School of Massage, Educating Hands School. And then you had the acupuncture school in New York. That was kind of one of those foundational schools. And so, pieces on the East Coast don't always jive with these pieces on the West Coast, but the philosophies sometimes were similar. Um, and I would say, actually, when I was in school, Ben Benjamin had come out with his one of his first book, Listen to Your Pain. And many of my teachers, Michael Loomis and Josie Davenport, were actually instructors for Ben Benjamin and did the trainings there. So I was able to attend those and be part of those. And so I think that would be a foundational book as well.
gotcha.
Listen to you.
All right. Um, at the time that you attended, because Florida School of Massage had been established at least for a good portion of time by the time that you got there, was there this sense that you were really attending this well-known, ubiquitous, historic, even certainly at this point in the 2020s, a historic school, in my estimation?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, we were doing three programs a year. We were having somewhere between 45 and 60 students in a class three times a year. And students would come from all over the country. Um, Back before the Finger Lakes School of Massage, people would come down in the wintertime for school from New York because they could take classwork in the Oriental medicine or Asian bodywork skills with an instructor, and we were approved for students to be able to get licensure when they graduated from us if they took certain portions of the program. Um, yeah, there were, people who would come from Michigan and they would come from, a whole variety of cold places for a winter experience in Gainesville. And then some of them would say, well, this is so great. I just want to stay here. And then they would do a structural integration certification or a sports massage certification or a polarity therapy certification. So yeah, and students, students were always proud to say they went to and they call it FSM, right? I went to FSM.
Yeah.
I'm a grad from FSM.
Uh, a strange question. I'm not too familiar. Is there like an alumni association or anything like that similar for FSM?
Yeah, there's before there was Facebook, there was less of this, but there was kind of what would you say, like job opportunity listings. Back then it was like listservs and things like that, or a job board, and students could look at the job board and it would be something from around the country. Um, and then now there's more of a like generalized Florida School of Massage Facebook page. And then of course there's on the website there's some job board piece that way now. So people generally, if they've had good experience with graduates from Florida School of Massage, they usually say, "Oh, we're up in New Hampshire. We're looking for some grads. You know, Jason told us to call down there and see if we could get somebody to come or you know and I think the we've done some what would you say, celebrations of the decades.
Yeah.
um so there was a 50th just recently, There was a 40th. Benny Vaughn came and talked at that one. There was a 30th. So sometimes that's where we kind of do like a reconnection with people. Um, and not not so much like a community college or a college where you have alumni association where it's a little more formalized.
Gotcha.
And then of course it seems like I haven't been there for a while, but it seems like even the classes themselves continue to have a Facebook page that they're privately still interacting with each other.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for that. So also what I'm hearing is you had, at least from a client's perspective, you had an introduction to massage therapy. So either before your entry level education or during or shortly thereafter, were there any really well known regional, state, or even national names that you were really well aware of or trying to follow and learn more about at the time?
Sure, sure. So in Florida, there's some kind of longtime presenters, right? The Upledger Institute, Paul St. John, Judith Walker. Um, I'd say Ben Benjamin was one of the people who would come down and do teaching and instruction. So those were kind of more nationwide known. And then you'd have someone like Aaron Mattis. I'm sure you might have heard of Aaron Mattis, who's active isolated stretching. He's more of he didn't like to travel as much, but he was in Sarasota and people could go and, learn from him at his clinic. I think that was a big piece. And then the Florida State Massage Association has been in existence since the 40s.
Wow.
So when I was involved with it, we were celebrating the 40th and 45th anniversaries of the FSMTA. So that was a yearly convention, one of the bigger conventions in the country with a trade show. So people like Bob King, who was at the Chicago School of Massage, would come down and teach classes. Um, I got to know Nancy Dale from Maine because of involvement with the AMTA Council of Schools. There was always a connection to Florida, many times through the convention. And the convention was usually a summertime event. Um, so people would, come people would say, oh, it's hot in the summer. It's like, well, you're at a convention center, there's a pool, you can go outside. Um, and then I guess the other thing is AMTA has always had a fairly big presence in Florida. And so in 1990, 91, the Massage Therapy Foundation launched itself at the Miami AMTA convention. So people like John Boletto and Diana Thompson and all the different people who've been involved as presidents or board members of the foundation, knew to come to Florida you know, to do continuing education, to do classes like that.
Mm, all right.
Yeah.
Which which would have come first for which one were you introduced to first, the Florida Association or the AMTA? Pete, if you can remember.
So I was introduced to both in school. The AMTA wasn't quite as active. Um, Back then, actually, Benny Vaughn was involved with it at that time, and Scott Lamp. And Scott Lamp, I think, was the national president. But Florida's a big state, so it's kind of hard to like have a meeting and have lots of people come to it. AMT has kind of done different like units and chapters now. I know in Texas there's a lot of units and chapters. So the FSMTA was kind of the local regional place to go and get education. So there was they would call it North Florida chapter or the Jacksonville or Tampa. And so the state was divided up that way. And so there was 23 different chapters. And so that was the place that I spent a good beginning of my career. I became the secretary for the Gainesville chapter or the North Central Florida chapter. Um, and then I became the president. And usually you become the president because you say yes instead of, like, are we all qualified to do this thing? Or, you know, so, and my name's Pete, so I can say it's the Peter principle. You kind of reach your highest level of incompetence, and then sometimes you learn, and sometimes you just fall down. And I actually enjoyed it. Like I liked to organize the meetings and get people to speak. And so I was also pretty involved with the state organization, and I became the legislative chair. So when we were doing lobbying with the legislation, um, and things like, having establishments, or, being sure that the name massage therapist was actually in all of the statute, um, different things that, or preventing other fields from kind of encroaching on massage therapy. And so through that, I was very involved with the Board of Massage. So my stepping stone was FSMTA. I was at AMTA, involved with council of schools through the school, going to meetings with meeting educators from all over the country. And then because I became the legislative chair, I was very interested in the Board of Massage. And so at some point, I put into the governor's appointment office, and I was appointed by the governor to the Board of Massage.
Gotcha. What time would that have been, your appointment to the board?
93, 94. So yeah, 94.
All right. Um,
Yeah.
can you also just, for me, I'm not, again, this is kind of a blind spot for me. Um, is there a stark difference between AMTA Florida's chapter and FSMTA,
Um,
or at the time?
I think at the time there was a place where there's competition. And FSMTA had a very large conference that had a lot of things going on. They had a very big lobbying money, and so there was competition. And then I feel like AMTA really kind of tried to up its game in terms of providing services to the people who are the members. And so there's been this kind of parallelism. There's both. And then somewhere along the line, through COVID and some different things that have happened within the FSMTA, there's less membership,
Hmm,
and there's more membership in the AMTA.
really?
It's hard to have a lot of chapters. It's a volunteer organization. So if you have someone who reaches that Peter principle, and they've reached their level of competence, and then they don't like it, and then they leave, that makes a chapter fall behind 3 steps. So sometimes people are like, well, and I'm not going to do that. Or people don't join anymore. Like I grew up kind of in the service world. I was a EMT, and I worked on a volunteer ambulance. So, I understand, like, people are busy, they've got other things to do, and it's not very, you don't get paid. So I think volunteering, is falls by the wayside. And so this is where AMTA, which is a very national organization and actually has staff that can support certain things,
Right.
um, that makes a difference. But FSMTA still has a conference, and they still have chapters. And I taught at a chapter meeting a few weeks ago up in Melbourne, and I was over in Fort Myers and taught for a chapter. So um, we always thought at one point, back in the early 90s, that the two should join together. That they should join together, and that didn't happen. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think there was a possibility that that could have happened.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes the hope for condensing, uh,
Yeah.
when reality is a little bit more like oil and water sometimes, which again,
Mhm.
bad thing
Mhm.
necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you have a national organization, to be absorbed, or to absorb a state chapter, there's egos that get involved. So one of the things I learned is, those are the places that I kind of spend less time anymore, where I'm more than willing to volunteer my time for the Board of Massage. I feel like I'm having an effect. I'm more than willing to volunteer my time for COMTA, the Commission on Massage Therapy Accreditation, because I'm learning something. I'm actually doing something and meeting people who are doing education.
Mm, that's an interesting perspective, Pete, because just to the way I feel, those are kind of the less glamorous ways to volunteer, right?
Mhm.
And certainly much more thankless to serve on your regulatory board as well as COMPTA, right? Um, so let's talk a little bit about your volunteerism. Did that start with FSMTA or AMTA for you?
FSMTA,
Okay.
although I was attending AMTA meetings, but
Sure.
it was FSMTA for
Okay.
sure.
Is there anything from your experience in volunteering with the FSMTA that really sticks out to you, particular memories or anything like that, that was really maybe like an accomplishment or something that you were particularly proud of in your time there?
Sure, sure, sure. So of course my wife is a massage therapist too, right? So when we went to one of our first, like, because if you're involved with the chapter, then you would go to a state meeting of all the chapters together. And we went to Tallahassee for legislative days,
Hmm.
which then said, here we are. We go to the different legislators or our own legislator and say, this is what's happening in massage, and we'd like you to support this bill, or, let's prevent the physical therapists from stopping massage therapy in this particular thing.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, um, one of the great joys was my wife does retail, and she actually started the bookstore at the Florida School of Massage from
Oh,
a little closet to an actual retail store. And so she took on the project of being involved with the FSMTA store. And so we had all the all the products, keychains and t-shirts and hats and all different things. So it always brings a smile to my face when I go to conference and I see the FSMTA store.
yeah.
So I think that's kind of fun. And we've had different people who ran the store. There was a store person. And so, we can reminisce about that. Um, when I was the legislative chair, do you remember there was this thing called a fax machine?
Yeah. I've heard of those. Think.
So that's how we would actually communicate. I would put together a fax, and back then the kind of the faxes, like, it didn't always feed correctly, so I would kind of tape it together and it would run through and send the whole fax.
Sounds really
So so one of my great joys was I was able to create a list where we actually then automated the dialing of the system to
cool.
actually fax to the chapters to say, this is what we need you to do, and call your legislature. And here's the phone number for the legislature. Now there's apps and, things fill in automatically. So I guess that would be kind of a funny, interesting thing. And then uh, the other thing that I would say from my volunteer time is we actually moved from the Department of Professional Regulation, which was like cosmetology and barbers and harbor pilots and funeral directors, to the Department of Health.
Okay.
So that was a kind of a big transition.
Gotcha. Yes, yeah. Actually, I think um I was looking at it. So Florida is currently departmentalized, as in your board of massage is underneath your Department of Health in the state.
Yeah.
Pretty well. Just as an aside, does that work pretty well? Is there a good collaboration with the Department of Health and the board?
Um, so there's a great collaboration. Like we have a lot of good support from the department.
Good.
We have a lot of investigative processes that don't, that are very clearly outlined. Um, Whereas in the Department of Professional Regulation, it was a little different. There wasn't quite the same standard of enforcement. Um, there's actually been some progress through legislative action that we now are required to do certain things with record keeping and employment records and different things like that. I'm personally more of a wellness person. Like I'm not really a healthcare person, even though I grew up as a EMT and worked on an ambulance and in a hospital. I see massage more as a care practice or a personal practice. So sometimes we're regulating people to have like records for people that they've already been seeing for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so now they're like, oh, well, you have to show us, samples of your records that you've collected the ID of this person so that you know that they're who they are. Um, and some of this comes down to like human trafficking, right? In our field, we have to really acknowledge that massage has a sensual, sexual underside that people understand when I say that, because you can see the name of a place. It says, Asian massage or, Asian foot massage or something. And it doesn't have to say the word Asian. It could be clearly someplace where sexual activity is going on.
Right.
And then human trafficking is also a big issue in the field. And I say that human trafficking is an issue in every field, right? Not just massage therapy or cosmetology, but restaurants and hotels and agriculture. And, we can look to different places to try to solve the problem of human trafficking, but it's not the norm for a single mom who's a massage therapist having a clinical space at a local massage place, like not a franchise, but like one of my teachers in Gainesville has rooms that she rents out to single moms and single dads, and they have their practice there 3 or 4 days a week. Those aren't people who are doing human trafficking,
Right.
but they have to comply with the human trafficking requirements of employment records and records of your people. So, it's interesting. It's kind of yes, it's the Department of Health. Yes, there's some great enforcement. There's licensure requirements. There's restrictions for licensure. Um, and, you know, in California, you have a different kind of regulatory story, city by city or certification. So, I'm not sure there's any one perfect solution. My friend, I've got some friends in Iowa, and we're always trying to figure out like how can we have things that don't sexualize massage? Like how do you outlaw the thing that you don't want? Is it prostitution? And if it is prostitution, then isn't it pretty obvious that a sheriff or the local police could monitor that for a few hours and see that, well, it's mostly men who are going in and out,
Yeah.
right? And those men are going in and out, and in the field, 85% of the people who are getting massages, according to the AMTA, are women. So if, 100% of the people going into this one particular location, and then of course you're there at 10:30 at night and you see that it's 100% of the people are going in there, it's probably pretty clear that some kind of sexual activity is going on.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. To shift gears a little bit,
Sure.
what about your experience volunteering with AMTA, Pete?
So I have had so many wonderful experiences with AMTA. I was when I first became a school involved with like record keeping and things like that, I learned about this thing called the Council of Schools for the AMTA.
Sure.
And I went to my first meeting in Miami when the foundation was formed at the National Convention. And I met just amazing people, David Lauderstein or Nancy Dale or Iris Berman or Bob King. And so I was really so excited, like, oh, well, this is how I can learn about school. So I was involved with committees. I was involved with helping kind of create and organize the conference once a year. Deborah Curtis, who's from Canada, was very, very involved with council schools. Rick Rosen, Stan Dawson. So, I highly recommend. I highly was like those were my leaders. Those are the people that I looked up to because I was only 30. And they had had their massage schools for a long time. So I learned so much, just about, running a school or, what do you all do about this? Or, one of the big projects in the Council of Schools was accreditation, right? Having accreditation and federal funds. And then I was also very involved with uh, conference, like early on in the 2000s. And they still have it. It's called the Operational Committee for the convention. And so I was invited by one of the presidents to just do reviews of continuing education providers and give feedback about, this is the presentation they've put in an application with, what do you all think about it? And we'd have a meeting and we'd say, oh yeah, this person's really good. This person has some great ideas, but they're not very organized. And the back then was they would even do like a little video, on a VHS,
Wow.
the old way.
Oh God, I love that. I want those guesses.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, but how would you store those, right? I mean, and that's the problem, right? Um, so that was a wonderful piece to be involved with that. And then I got to teach at AMTA conventions, sometimes for state groups, state chapters, but I think one of the first time I taught was for the committee. We were actually getting a lot of kind of not great applications because people don't know how to write learning objectives, right? They're teachers or they have ideas, but they just don't know how to write learning objectives. And so they asked me to lead a class.
Hmm.
And we had all these people who were wanted to be CE providers. And so I just, spent an hour, I think we spent 2 hours. And I just said, well, here's some examples of really bad ones.
Yeah,
Right. And I said, so you could do better than this.
yeah.
And fortunately there wasn't the person who wrote that one, it was in the class, but you know, I just gave some examples. And then I said, and there's so many sources out there. If the Board of Massage from Florida says you want to be a CE provider and you want to learn, do 2 or 3 learning objectives for a class, it's pretty simple. You're going to demonstrate something, the student's going to practice that, and then they're going to be able to show you what they learned, and so that was kind of a wonderful kind of experience. And then I used to teach business in the massage school in Gainesville, so I was able to do some kind of advanced business classes for massage therapists. Usually things about simple marketing things, and then also very rudimentary tax planning things. You know, like everything's a deduction if you're self-employed. And so when you start telling people, well, you actually should have kept record for that and you could have deducted that off of your taxes. And then they go, man, you just saved me like $5,000, and this year I'll make, you know, do better. So that's where I really spent time with AMTA.
Okay. Have you seen a shift in AMTA national, like the convention environment over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so it used to be there were a lot of people who were presenters who would buy a booth and kind of show you their stuff
Okay.
to get you to do a class.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would be teaching at the conference and sometimes they would just be there. Like, you knew you would probably see somebody from the Barnes Institute or Upledger or Paul St. John
Hmm.
or somebody new, and I'm just picking those names because those people know those names. What I see a lot more now are people who aren't really part of the industry, but they've got a product to sell
Yeah.
and kind of sitting at their booth, not really interacting and expecting people to come to them.
Hmm.
Um, so there's that, but and I've been on the show floor a variety of times, and I'm like, I don't need that product. I'm not interested in that. Um, Biotone, BioFreeze, all the different lotion and cream companies, they need to be there. They got to be there. And they're giving out samples, they're doing different stuff. Um, uh, I think that the field really shifted a lot when we had big companies coming in and, doing things at shows and sponsoring. Um, a good example of that is at the FSMTA, there was a kind of a big blowout where people were like, well, if you have Performance Health come in and they're giving, $100,000 and they want top sponsor billing, what does that do for all of the other people? And so I think that's, the money game, has been part of that. So, you know, I can't judge any of that, but if Massage Magazine wants to have a big booth and Upledger wants to have a big booth and spend that kind of cash, they're going to have some kind of sponsorship. Um, but I think that the booths are fairly expensive, and I think that some of the products that end up in there, like tooth whitening or aura photographs or things like that, maybe aren't quite what they should be. And back in the day, just even 7 or 8 years ago, aromatherapy was a big thing, right? Do we see aromatherapy being the same big thing anymore? Right? Or tuning forks or sound healing. So, I think that sometimes in-person marketing at the conference isn't always the most cost effective for people. I don't
Gotcha.
know what is, but I can tell you, even when I was doing stuff with One Concept, you'd have people who would buy a booth because they were in that city and they were selling you like a vitamins prescription or something, or wholesale vitamins or something. You know, I don't know. We're not really nutritionists in massage.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Uh, let's see. Talk to me about AFMTE, the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education, and your involvement with them.
So the love of my life is education.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher. Like what people says, what do you do? I say, well, I teach touch and I teach students.
Mm.
And so my biggest issue as we were coming to the 2000s was that schools were education facilities that were businesses. We know about things like Cortiva. We know about, big schools that were purchased by corporates that then said, "Oh, we're gonna keep your school." My friend Bob King sold his school to Cortiva. The schools in Seattle got sold to Cortiva. I was involved with doing accreditation and going and reviewing the schools at Cortiva. And what we would always see is that there would be an instructor who was placed in the classroom who wasn't prepared.
Sure.
Okay. They were given a curriculum. Here's the books. Oh, you could pass the test, so you can now be the teacher. And so I would say, I think we were in San Antonio. I think that might have been like 2009 or 2008, and as part of Council of Schools. And we would say, students aren't doing well. They're coming into the field, they're passing the exam, they're dropping out of the field in 4 years. So you just took their money, you educated them, and then they've left the field.
Right.
And so I always felt like, something's wrong in the picture. And I always felt like it was teachers. And so we created the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education in 2009 and 2010 as a enhancement to the field. The AMTA Council of Schools was shifting in its uh, job description or category within AMTA, just as a corporate structure. We weren't really recognized as an entity. So there was going to be less funding. So we just said, well, what we'll create this thing. You all support this, and we can then match this up with accreditation.
Okay.
There's a variety of reasons for disagreement about all that, and I don't really need to speak too much about that. But the Alliance put together, this was kind of that same time when the massage therapy body of knowledge was happening. You're aware of the BMTBOK,
Okay.
and the body of knowledge was put together by some very smart people, right? Susan Salvo was involved with that. Um, a whole variety of people that, did some really good work. But it also was up for feedback. It was coming around. There was different conferences, and I remember being in Orlando with Rick Rosen and Stan Dawson and Sue Bibick and Michael Shea, a variety of different people. We'd say, well, this seems great, but it doesn't really like outline what a teacher could do. And so we kind of did some feedback for it. We did a whole analysis of the project and kind of looked at it as well, and we were using Blooms at the time, like where does this fit into Blooms? Is this a task? Is this an action? Is this something that people can demonstrate? Um, we usually talked about um, skills and ability, right? Knowledge, skills, and ability.
Sure. Just to slow down, I think you're talking about Bloom's learning taxonomy, right?
Yes. Yes. Blooms. Yeah. And different people like to use different things now, it's more updated. But at the time, knowledge, skills, and abilities in massage are pretty basic. And so we kind of did some levels of that. And some of the things in the BOK were very advanced because the people who were putting together the body of knowledge were like very advanced. And so sometimes it's hard to like go back to, like I'm actually in the classroom, at the first days of school teaching you foundational massage, and then I'm taking you for 6 months, maybe 8 months, 700 hours with some practice. I can't expect you to know the interpersonal relationship philosophies of some therapy when your reading levels only at the eighth grade. So the Alliance started as a teacher organization. It really started as we want to have high quality, well-trained teachers in every classroom.
Yeah.
And that meant continuing education classrooms.
Right.
And then we also wanted to include owners, right, and administrators.
Mhm.
So what we did in 2009 was we did a kind of what you're doing, a startup, right? We put out to our friends at schools and we said, we have a founding membership fundraising. And we raised, I don't know, 50, $70,000
Um,
because people really felt like it was something that they could buy into. Um, and so we started a corporation and we got a management company to take us on. And part of getting a management company is the company has to buy into what you're doing. And really, at first, what we thought we would be doing would be like creating, um, what would you say? Back then, the search engines would then pop up your local massage school who was a alliance member, and then you would get leads
search engine.
for recruitment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out very well
Hmm.
because Cortiva had a lot of money. And
Ah,
so they were search engine optimizing crazily and successfully. And so our super app didn't work out, our super idea. But the philosophy of, we had conferences. We did teacher trainings at the conferences. We did things for continuing education providers. We did support for instructors. So from 2010 till 2013, we did a yearly conference in fun places. Then we took a break and then we went to every other year. And so that was a very successful model. We actually had money. We were running our show. And but we still didn't have a certification for teachers. There still is not one. So that's my like I feel like I've failed a little bit, because people say, "Oh, I don't want to be I'm already a teacher. Why am I going to pay you to be certified?" But we had some really great work that we did with Dawn Hogue at the Alliance, I mean at the CompTA, and Deanna Silvestri. And we actually had a tremendous rubric that we could evaluate somebody's application for being able to uh, do the core competencies for teachers. We set out 10 standards. We had all kinds of different sections that people could verify. Oh yes, I know how to teach. This is an example of what I do when I'm in the class regarding equity or diversity or inclusion. We have people who have disabilities. This is how I make adjustments for them. Here's how I develop my curriculum. And we'd have videos, like just show us a video, like what are you doing in the classroom? And so we have some teachers who are certified. And then of course those teachers then have to pay money to be recertified. And it's one of those things that, do people really want to do that? Um, and then I'd also say that about the ELAP project.
Yeah, sure.
ELAP.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in the midst of all of that, we started this thing called the what do we call it? The the what is it? It's a national coalition of massage therapy, the
Sure.
coalition.
The coalition.
And the coalition, right? And so AMTA and the foundation and all these different groups. And so there was a bit of like, well, what the hell? You guys are just this young organization. You're trying to tell us what to do. And you think that the BOK is, this thing. And so then in my opinion, and this is just my observation since I was at the original coalition meeting, we had some folks from AMTA and some folks from ABMP, and they decided, oh, well, we're going to collaborate and we're going to create this thing that's the entry level assessment project,
Yeah.
which is another version of what the BOK was,
Mm.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
But because those two groups, which had a lot of the cash put together, they then went around the country and said, it's the ELAB. Now, Ann Williams and Cynthia Roberto did some beautiful work. I mean, the blueprint still stands the test of time. It's what I point to when I say to somebody, "Oh, you want to start a school,
Right.
right? Or you want your school to be better. Do you know about this ELAP?" When we talk about schools at the Board of Massage, right, and we say, uh, "Oh, you're not meeting the standard." This last year, schools have now been flagged for not meeting the minimum passing rate of the MBLEX. So the board office has like, well, it's been 2 years and you're still below the MBLEX standard pass rate. They've called them up in front of the board to say, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to remediate? And each one of the board members who are usually somewhat involved with schools, they say, do you know what the ELAP is? And the person will go, no, not really.
Yeah. Right.
No, not really. Well, how do you expect to actually, run a school, and maybe you're a beauty school or maybe you're a cosmetology school or whatever, but if you don't know either what the body of knowledge is or the entry level uh, assessment project is, how do you expect to be successful in passing the NBLEX? So that's an interesting thing. So for me, the alliance is it's kind of bittersweet. I was the first president. I spent 5 years as the first president. Um, it's a volunteer project. Um, I was spending 20, 25 hours a week with no pay. and running a conference every year. And we had great conferences. I was in St. Charles, we were in Charleston, we were in Minneapolis. Um, the people who would come to the conference, we had things that were Educator of the Year award, CE Provider of the Year award that were sponsored by different groups, BioFreeze or uh, Biotone or and part of my joy was to see my friends, school owners, and spend time with them. So, and the alliance is actually doing well. I think that the people who are involved with the alliance, MK Brennan is there, Nathan Nordstrom is there. Um, I think Sherry Ulrich did a beautiful job picking up the ball for people. We always started this out saying it was a 25-year project. The core competencies for teachers to get embedded into the field is a 25-year project. That started in 2010. It's 2025.
About 10 years to go.
We got about 10 years to go. And it is embedded in the CompTIA requirements. Teacher qualifications are endorsed by CompTIA. Um, I always encourage the state boards to do that, to think in terms of, you know, it's very straightforward what it could be to be a teacher. The core competencies stand the test of time. ELAP stands the test of time.
Gotcha. Just out of curiosity, real quick, when was that first coalition meeting?
Let's see. So I would say the first coalition meeting, and I may be wrong, but I think it was in 2011, and we were in St. Louis.
Mhm.
I have a picture I could send you we were all in front of the arch in
Wow.
St. Louis,
Oh,
right
God.
here, Bush Stadium.
I
Right.
love March so much. Sorry, a point of personal privilege.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
have to send me that picture, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I'll dig that picture up for you. And Ruth Warner was there, Rick Rosen was there, Kate Henriol was there, uh, Bob Benson. So it's a pretty historic little picture.
Yeah, can you speak to how that convening of the seven major organizations, how they all came together like that?
Um, so as I remember, we created the alliance. We in 2009, we did our first conference in 2010 in Park City in May. And at that time, all the different players were invited to be there. And so I think from there, because had done a bunch of work on the BOK, like we called it a recalibration, and used the, KSAs. We said, we really need to have some time to just talk about, where we're going in the field, AMTA, ABMP, what is it that we're thinking about? So I would say it was either 2010 or the springtime of 2011.
Gotcha.
That's kind of my remembrance of it early on.
Talk to me if you can briefly about your work with the Massage Therapy Foundation.
So I adore the foundation. I think that the foundation has been a beautiful part of our field, whether you're looking at grants or whether you're looking at projects. Um, it's one of those volunteer organizations where the person who's the president gets a stipend, and so they're dedicating their time to do that and kind of spending time away from home and family. So anybody who's staff at the foundation is paid by fundraising that goes from grants that come from AMTA, and whatever donations come in from the world of massage. Um, the project that I'm most grateful to be part of was the Samueli study that we did for the Department of Defense, where we did and determined, worked with the Surgeon General of the Department of Defense, and the a person who he and his wife were very involved with pain studies.
Okay.
So we were able to have a meta-analysis of the effect of massage for pain, and then we were able to break that out for surgical pain and cancer pain, and that was also published in the journal
Wow.
Pain. And so that work is that string that we used as a search is still available through the foundation. I did a lot of teaching of teacher and research literacy for the foundation, so I got to travel around the country for teaching teachers how to think about research literacy into their classrooms. Um, that was another piece that, as a AFMTE president, I was like, teachers, they're overwhelmed. They don't even know where to start to put something little module in to help the students even understand what research methods are, even if case studies. So we usually spent 8 hours, sometimes 12 hours at a location. Um, and sometimes they were sponsored by BMP, and sometimes they were sponsored by the foundation itself. So it was
Gotcha.
great. I really, really think that's a great organization.
Yeah. Thank goodness we have them too.
Well, and all those community projects are incredibly valuable. The website's filled with information that, you want to know the benefits of massage, you want to know the effects of massage. The Massage Foundation is the place to go. And there'll be a conference in Alexandria, I think in April. So if anybody's watching this, it's usually a great meeting, a couple days. Alexandria is a really great place. I think they've done it in Seattle too.
Yeah. Do you plan to be there this year, Pete?
I actually won't be around. I'm going to be traveling for AMTA Texas, teaching a whole at their spring conference for 20 some hours. So the time isn't right.
Beautiful. Well, the Texas chapter does a great job too with their conventions.
Yeah.
Uh, all right. So tell me, how did you get involved with CompTA?
So I got involved with CompTIA from councils, AMTA council schools.
Right.
Back in the day, 20, let's see, 1993, 94, 95. The big deal was the Department of Education wasn't doing any kind of funding or Pell Grants because massage schools were really just diploma programs. And so it was a kind of a goal and a dream of many members of the Council of Schools to have an accreditation program. It used to be the Commission on um, Massage Therapy Approval and Accreditation. And then we switched that into just accreditation. And so I was committed to doing that for my school, the Florida School of Massage. And so we began to go through and look at the standards, curriculum, all the 10 standards, all the elements, and just evaluate our program. And it's based on a 600-hour program. And there's clinic requirements and there's education requirements. There's, every kind of thing about record keeping and finances. And so it was very interesting to me. And I felt like it would really help the Florida School of Massage be a more solid school financially. And then maybe in the future, if they chose to, that they could then qualify for Pell Grants. So I started up being involved 90, 93, 94. By 95, I got buy-in from the owner of the school, Paul Davenport, to start to do the self-study report. And I created small groups of teachers in different sections and said, okay, you're doing the financials. So here's all these questions. Here's all the things you need to prove. You're doing admissions, let's sit together. And so we spent probably 18 months as a school looking at all aspects of what the school did. And we're a private school, we're just kind of going by the seat of our pants. Like, the Commission on Independent Education says we have to do this. Okay, well, we'll now keep records like that. And so we had another outside standard, and everybody at first was like, I don't want to do this.
Right.
This is crazy. Why are you asking me to do this? And I'd say, well, because the students are going to benefit from it, first of all, and you're going to know what your job is better.
Yeah.
And so by about the fourth or fifth meeting, they stopped resisting and they'd go, so you mean I could change it the way I want to? And we could just tell them that this is how we do it because we decided that? And I'd say, yeah, if you have a reason why you're doing something and you could explain why the reason is, and you got some results that you did it and it succeeded, the people in Compton are going to be like, that's great. Thanks for showing us a new way.
Hmm.
So we got accredited in 97.
All right.
And so then I did a renewal in 7 years, 5 years later. So that would be 2002. And then we did another one in 2008. And so I did four different renewals for Compta. And in the midst of that, I also then became a site visitor.
Yeah.
So I would go out to schools. So I was a volunteer. We'd get paid for travel and meals and hotel. But basically, I would go and learn about someone else's school based on the standards. So I've been to probably 30 different site visits. I'm a team leader now, so I actually plan the travel, plan the meals for people, plan the all of the hotels, and it's really quite fun. And most of the time, people who come, they're from a school, they've volunteered, they're doing it to maybe make their school better or to learn more about it. Or in my case, whenever we go do a site visit, I always invite the whole staff to come and watch the proceedings, like to come to the opening introduction and then to be there at the end. And then I always say, and you probably learned something from this, and we need volunteers, and we'd love for you to come travel with us.
Yeah.
And so we get lots of volunteers to do that.
Hmm.
We eat good when you're on trip with me.
Good. I like the sound of that.
We eat good.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you breaking that down a little bit, because I feel like perhaps a lot of people or a lot of schools maybe don't understand exactly what goes into CompTIA accreditation. And
Mhm.
are you able to speak briefly about like the benefits of accreditation through CompTIA, Pete?
Sure, sure, sure. So a lot of times schools are small schools, and so I always recommend that they think about doing an endorsed curriculum.
Right.
Same standards. They're just not having the same costs for travel and inspection and things like that. But the 10 standards and the many elements of accreditation involve every aspect of the school. So within admissions or student services, there's certain standards that are just expected of a school, or in your catalog, if you say you provide this for them, well, why don't you show me, like in a student record, that you did that for them?
Mm,
And most of the places say, well, we didn't really notate that. We'd say, well, that's fine, but I bet you do it. So in the next time that you meet with a student and you keep a note, then you've kind of met the standard. So it's not like a punitive experience. It's really like, we want you to be a great school. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so here's some feedback. And even before a school gets a site visit, they're going to send their self-study review to staff, and the staff members are going to say, oh yeah, these areas are totally clear on. We can totally see and we can send the group out. But this little section here on, let's say the program evaluation, right? Or a lot of ones have uh, program advisory committees. And the program advisory committee is like three people who are part of the school. It's not somebody from the field, it's not somebody from a chiropractic perspective, hiring people. So I think the value of it is that the school is a more solid organization, that every part of the school, every person in the school knows that the people that they're working with have a job that they know that they're doing. And then what I always say is, and this may not be true so much in this environment, but if you chose to start to think about doing student loan programs, right, Title IV funding, because you qualified for that, that may help change the enrollment level of your school. For instance, in Gainesville, as we came into the 2007, 08, remember how the financial world started to crumble?
I remember
Um,
about that.
um, Paul and Darren said to me, "Well, do you think we should take Pell Grants? We qualify. We're accredited. Do you think we should consider doing that?" And I said, "Well, people aren't really going to be able to pay for the program the same way, but if they could get a Pell Grant and pay for half their program, it's a grant. They don't have to repay it, and then you could do a student loan for them. That might help kind of bridge the gap for you all." And so that was a big benefit. Um, and then like even in Florida, if you're doing your renewal for your school licensure, if you're accredited, it's pretty much given that you're going to get your approval. You don't have a lot of paperwork to fill out.
Right.
So it's your kind of bureaucracy go down a little bit.
Who doesn't want that?
I think that, if you're a small school and you've got four staff, right? A director, an office person, a person who's answering the phone, and then someone who's doing your finances, that would be kind of helpful to be, that, every 7 years you're doing accreditation review and you're doing that. And I would say the other thing that I always experience is there are people who have a school and when they make little committees and the people who are on the committees have a say in what the policy is,
Hmm.
they stay longer
Yeah.
because they're invested in what they just did. Um, I see a lot of schools that like one or two people do the accreditation process, and then I'll go into the admissions person and say, "Were you involved with any of this?" And they'll go, Not really." And when was the last time you switched jobs? Oh, like a year ago. So, sometimes that top down, oh, we're going to do this accreditation isn't the best way to do it.
Gotcha. I think that makes sense. When we talk about preservation, and so we've spent probably
Mhm.
hours almost at this point talking about the past and what you've lived through, all of your experiences. Can you share with me what are your thoughts about the importance of preserving massage history?
So at the start, I told you I was a historian.
Yeah.
I have a degree in history. Um, I am a nut for massage history. So there's so many pieces that are so important, like a school having a good library,
Yeah.
um, like really like even old anatomy books or old massage books, or having files that are PDFs, because on Google you can actually get some of the PDFs of the old massage books. If you just go into Google Scholar and you put in massage therapy or massage or manual therapies, there's numbers and numbers of books that are actually scanned and available. One of the oldest ones that I have is from the 1600s on venery um, venery and percussion in manual therapy. So,
I
I think it's important. I've got a whole history file I'll send you, my dear.
oh,
Um,
fun, Pete.
yeah.
Great.
Now, I do have a book that I think you're well aware of, and I
Yeah.
think that you can see it. Um, Pat Benjamin. I hope that you get Pat Benjamin on to your place
Yeah.
to do a time with her. You can tell her that I think that you would be really beneficial for her to do this. This book was created from Curtis Overset. So Deborah Curtis was involved with this book.
Oh,
I think it's gone out of print,
yeah.
but it's still available as a PDF.
Okay.
So you might talk to her or Deborah about having a PDF and maybe having a loaning library or something.
Yeah.
Because this book is tremendous.
Right.
North American massage. And I think that I learned a lot from this, and I felt like I knew a lot. Um, it's hard to keep a book like this, like this. This is the Swedish massage book from the Chicago school, and it's falling apart,
Yeah.
right? So, this needs to be digitized. So I
Yeah.
think that would be a preservation. Um, but I know that Pat Benjamin has a lot of materials, and I think that she and Judy Calvert at one point I got them together, and they were trying to figure out how to preserve some of the things. So I think you're on the right path. Like, how do we preserve this? And it might be something from the foundation that we could go, like, have a little project and get a grant that the history of massage is important, and there's whether it's digitized or whether it's old massage tables or equipment. There's so much out there. um, I also know that you live in Arkansas.
Yeah.
So Hot Springs, Arkansas, at the Buckstaff is a tremendous massage resource. So, maybe that would be someplace that you can maybe do a little project and get a permission and, do some video and, just the Xander machines themselves, right? Just the display of the Xander machines. Like, I spent an hour there, and I've been there 3 times. So I just go back and I'm like, oh my God, honey, it's the Xander machines. And she'll go, can we move on now? We've seen these. And I'm like, no. And it's behind glass now, and I can't really see it. So I want um so for me, right? Like, what is massage? What is the history of massage? It's people, but it's also like these equipments,
Yeah.
you know, what was medical gymnastics? What was the nursing skill after World War I, and the men came back and they were using hydrotherapies and water therapies, and we say, oh, Watsu's all this new thing, and it's like, well, no, in Greece, you know, kings and slaves got treatment because everyone needed to go to the healing space. And you had good food and you had music and you got massage. So there's a piece that I think gets lost when we call something a spa, right? Like, downtown Fort Pierce has something called a spa. And then I walk in and I see a bunch of equipment, but I don't see any water. I don't see any, uh, soaking tub or sauna or anything. So I'm not sure it's a spa, but that we've, named it this thing. So sometimes I think we've lost some of our field to that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm going to have to marinate with that paragraph you just gave, Pete, because it sends my brain in so many different. I've got my synapses are firing, so I'm going to marinate with that one. So it seems like I don't want to make any assumptions. Do you have a collection of massage history then?
Yeah, yes. I don't have, well, I have gotten rid of some of my equipment because I don't really need it or want it. You know what I mean? Like, when you get old like me, it's like, how many things am I going to leave behind for somebody that's going to throw in their dumpster?
Yeah.
But there was a gentleman who used to own the Florida School of Massage. His name was Bruce Seimer,
Yeah.
and he returned back to Gainesville. He needed treatments, and he paid me money for treatments, but he said, but I have this whole collection of stuff, and I'm sure that you might like to see some of it. And there was, like, electric machines and all kinds of different stuff. And so I said yes to a lot of things. So, um, But I know that Judy and Pat Benjamin have that kind of type of collection. And I know that Pat Benjamin was trying to get it to maybe Northwestern Health Sciences for their school. Do you know what I'm talking about
Uh,
in Minneapolis?
oh, Indiana.
Joni, yeah, in Minneapolis. So Joni Holt is involved with that. She does a wonderful massage symposium every year. And I'm not really sure where Pat Benjamin's stuff has ended up or if it has ended up, but we're all getting old enough. And I know that Judy Calver needs to find a place for her stuff. And, this is the kind of thing where, if there was a massage hall of fame, Judy would be the one who would have that. And they tried to do something where you would go to a building and see stuff. It could be that it really comes back to the park service and some of that stuff goes to the Buck staff.
Right.
And then I also think that and I haven't been there in a long time, but the Battle Creek, in Michigan,
Sure.
where the Kellogg, that whole process, there may be some ways to do that. And we live in a world that is digital, so it could be that you yourself do a little project and say, oh, the Society of Massage Archives needs to go out and do a little permissioning, do some video, so you do little tours.
So, what do you think, or what do you hope that the future of massage therapy deals in terms of preserving, looking back, really holding value on our history?
So it really depends on the teachers to inspire the students. Um, the the students who learn about their history, like just being inspired to go to Hot Springs, Arkansas, to see it, could be like, oh, this is why I came to this field. Like it could be like almost like a community memory. When I show this book in my business class and I pass it around, students are like blown away because it's got tests in it, right? And they can answer the quiz because they know what it is because it's basically Swedish massage and anatomy. Um, and so I think people need touch. I think people want touch. I think that there are many, many true resorts and true locations, Harbin Hot Springs or 10,000 Waves in Santa Fe, that try to embody that it's a wellness practice. Um, and so it's not just, oh, you're going to get a massage and go out the door. You're going to get a massage, eat some food, go sit on the patio, sit in the sun, come back in, maybe get some other kind of treatment. Do you know where Ojo Caliente is in Santa Fe and in outside of Espanola in New Mexico?
It's kind of ringing some bells, but probably I'm not well acquainted or
Okay, okay. Well, Ojo Caliente was where the indigenous people went to the springs.
okay.
Iron Springs, Sulphur Spring, all different springs that then became like a gathering place, and there was a hotel there. And now it's become quite fancy.
Hmm.
But if you're indigenous, you can still go there.
Ah,
Do you see what I'm saying? So like there's this piece of like we're not all separate. We have to all meet at the waters somewhere. And it's the waters and the manual work that connect us. And so this is what I think the students need from their teachers is, why are we doing this thing that we call effleurage and why does it have a French name?
yeah.
Like if you then say to them, you don't have to call it effleurage, you could call it gliding, and as Sandy would say, well, it's all kind of the same stuff, right? It's just how you put it together. And then I think when you have the respect for that, then you say to yourself, well, when I'm working with somebody like a baby and I touch them and they fall asleep, and that's a wonderful outcome. right. And then I work with an elder person who's in a rehab center, and they haven't slept well because they've recovering from a fractured femur, and the bells and the ringing, all that stuff. And I go and I touch them for a little bit, and they get some sleep. The history is really about care, right? And that's what Pat Benjamin's book is all about, right? We were either nurses or midwives or barbers. And so, this is why I don't see it as healthcare. I see it as like wellness care. So that's the piece for me. And how do you teach the history? It's boring in most of the books, right? It's super boring. But, maybe the society could put together a little like, we took ourselves to Hot Springs, and we just went around and like, here's this building with this new place that's got water. And they've invented it in a different way so that it's kind of interesting. And then here's the old way, like in the history museum of it all. Because I know that there's two or three places in the history museum where there's electricity and water at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, when I wasn't that kind of dangerous, you know. Um, but like that's still going on a little bit, right? How do we hold the history?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Tell me, is there ways that you can point to specifically that an understanding or an appreciation, at least bare minimum, of massage therapy's history, how it's influenced your practice, Pete?
Sure, sure, sure. So, I'd say first things first, like that first massage, right? Like I got my first massage. My mom actually bought it for me. I went to a woman's house. We sat down and we had tea.
Mm,
Then she put me on the table and I really want you to know you're going to be covered, you're going to be warm, you're going to be safe. If you fall asleep, it's totally cool. So it wasn't a business for her. It was like a relationship.
yeah,
I think that's one part of it. I think that the other part of it is that it's about self-care, care of self. And so you don't have to go to a massage therapist to get self-care much anymore, right? I mean, there are massage chairs and there's massage guns and there's, foam rollers and all this stuff, but there's not a lot of like, um, how do you really do it in a way that's you're not hurting yourself? So I think that's a like a place, maybe a YouTube or something where it's like, massage has the ability to help you, but you don't want to hurt yourself. Um, and I think there's a lot of people who see stuff on massage and I'm saying this like kind of in a like really serious way. Like I don't know how do you judge a massage when you go to the massage championships?
yeah,
Right? It's a very public thing, and there's a lot of I've watched some of them, and I think to myself, I would not want to be on that table. I don't care what you say, right? That's not a massage that I find interesting for my own body.
yeah,
Now, maybe somebody might, but I don't. And the music, the lights, the oil, all that stuff, it's more private than that.
right.
It's a much more private experience. Um, and that doesn't mean that like student clinic where it has curtains and it's kind of quiet and there's group energy. Um, I can tell you so many times because I when I taught at the school, I would always tell the people at the clinic, if somebody cancels, I've got a little free space if you need a body. And I'd just, be quiet and I'd give the student feedback and say, oh, that feels really good. Oh, that pressure, is just right. And I'd just say a few things, and then around me, the people around me would go, oh, that pressure feels really good, right? Or move to the right a little bit. And it's like people don't really know how to ask for what they want.
Yeah,
So that's part of what I'm trying to say is, how do we ask for what we want when we don't know because we haven't ever had that experience. And so, that's what I think is helpful. And whenever I do a class, I'm always reminding the student on the table, it's okay. If it feels shitty, why don't you tell them? And if it feels really good, why don't you tell them? And they all giggle, right? And then they start going, oh yeah, that feels good. Could you go to the right? Could you go to the right? Because it all touch really kind of feels good. It's a matter of, you know, range. Like, does it feel really good? And if it feels really good, I'm probably going to fall asleep because that's one of the best outcomes, isn't it?
I think
Rest.
I'm not. I'm with you. Yes, rest is so precious these days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, all right, let's go into some closing thoughts. Um,
Sure.
Tell me, what legacy do you hope that all of your work in these 30 plus years will amount to?
Um, I feel like I've lived a precious life. I've been involved with regulation, I've been involved with accreditation. So I feel like I don't have to say, oh, I'm leaving a legacy. I feel like I'm just leaving a positive effect.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. And for a long time, I would say, oh, I want to be this, or I want, teach at this. And what I'd say is I feel so grateful, right? I've gotten to do pretty much everything I've ever dreamed to doing. I travel around in an RV. I've taught business to students. I've had students come back to class 20 years later and say, I took my first continuing education class with you. And this year I'm retiring, so I'm going to take my last one with you.
Um,
So I feel like I have rounded out my world and I'm not going to stop doing massage. I'm only 63. I'm not going to stop teaching. But I don't need to write a book. I don't need to make a bunch of videos. I just feel like, my possibility is that, you feel good about yourself as a therapist,
yeah,
as a teacher. Yeah.
that's beautiful. If you could record and preserve anyone's record, their experience of massage therapy that is currently now deceased, who do you wish could be preserved, their experience?
So I think your question is about like if there's a person who was a teacher or a professional massage therapist whose
Yes.
record I want to keep.
Yeah.
Um,
You can pick more than one.
I think that Deborah Curtis from Canada has a wonderful, beautiful experience of having a school and a publishing company, and I think that she is not honored as much as she could be.
Okay.
Um, if I were to think about someone who um, kind of where I came from, I would think that would be someone like uh, Judith Aston, who's still alive,
Mm.
right? Like I think that there's the people in the fascia world who have started out in 2007, Helen Langevin, Robert Schleip, those are people who are really making a difference. Um, and then I actually think that we miss a few things, and there's kind of subtle, but it's in Pat Benjamin's book. Kellogg was really onto some stuff. Kellogg was really onto some stuff. And it was food as medicine, it was touch and healing and those kinds of things. So that would be something that people always, oh, he was kind of a quack or this or that. And really he was really just kind of a someone who was trying to create community where people were well. Um, and then I don't know, I think that we probably don't know much about some of the more Eastern European traditions. But Leah and I took a trip and we did a bike tour through Hungary. And in Hungary, every town has a spa or a pool.
Really?
And so there's a whole legacy of like self-care and treatment in Hungary that's really valuable
Hmm.
that people don't even really know about. And every day we rode our bikes, we ended up a city or a town, and we went in the hot waters every day.
Nice. Kind of along those same lines, you were challenged by our first guest, Sandy Fritz, to participate in this podcast. Who would you now encourage, might be a better word,
Sure.
encourage to participate on the Hands of History podcast?
Sure. So, so I think that there's a man named Stan Dawson. I don't know if you've ever met Stan Dawson, but he was one of the presidents of the Alliance, one of the original people in the Alliance. He's a chiropractor. I think he has some beautiful ideas about blending massage and body works and philosophies. Um, you can tell him I suggested he's
Definitely.
there. I'm in love with Nancy Dale. Like she's my one of my massage mothers.
Yeah.
Sandy, Nancy, and Iris Berman are my massage mothers. So I would love to see Nancy's perspective on this. Um, I think Iris Berman would really be someone that you would enjoy interviewing. Um, Iris is someone who I've traveled with and spent lots and lots of time with, and uh, was with her even the night when her husband Ed died. And so we've been together for a long time. And when his remains came back from Gil Headley, Gil had done a dissection with him and then cremated the body. She said, well, it's only appropriate that you're here when we open up and see his ashes. So she's one of my dear humans on the planet. Um, and then I think that there's a woman that she had a school in Arizona. Her name is Margaret Avery.
Okay.
So you notice I'm giving you a lot of women.
That's okay. We
That's
need,
what I want. That's what I want. You see, this is the problem in our field. Sometimes we have too many men saying what massage is.
we want to talk about gender. Um, the men that I've invited on this podcast tend to be more apt to respond and to accept the invitation. Um, so yeah, we definitely need to highlight and venerate the women that have contributed to the field.
Yeah.
So I'm on that.
So and so I'm sure you've heard that you should get with Judy and you should probably get with Pat. This is a field that 85% of the people who are in the field are women. And so, as someone who is a gentle man, right, a gentle person, and you know me, I really feel like we need to do ourselves a really good service in the society that we help the women who are the the foundation of this
Right.
to really, come forward and come and do an interview.
Yeah. Be
I think
elevated.
yeah. And if you need any help or encouragement with that, you just call me up.
All right.
Okay. You call me up and I'll get on the phone and we'll be like, okay, you got to do this.
I'm bringing back up.
Okay.
Excellent. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like to explore, Pete?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on it, and I think that we're in a place where there's a lot of touch phobia or people who are unclear about appropriate touch and safe touch. And there used to be a beautiful program that we knew about from Sweden where the kids learned to appropriate touch in first grade and kindergarten, and that they would then give each other kind touch throughout the day. It would be a wonderful world if we could teach all kindergartners through third graders to actually touch each other kindly. So that would be an amazing change in our world. And as well as I do, just go out on the street and you hear people being very aggressive and driving their cars very loud. And um, we live in a world where people are isolated and afraid. And what massage is a place for people to become into relationship and to change fear to love.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. I love that. Thank you, Pete. Do you have anything coming up that you'd like to speak on? Let people know some self-promotion here.
Sure. My website is called Whitridge Wellness, whitridgewellness.com. I have a pretty full schedule. This is a continuing education year, so I teach workshops all around the country, but especially in Florida during the renewal time. I call them myofascial components of pain classes. So sometimes we take the body regionally, sometimes we think about a system like the breath system, or teaching like a national convention, doing a SCAR class, extremities class. Um, all the classes are always different, but because it's the class, right? The people who are in the class, that's why it's different. Um, and I'm just thrilled this year to have 5 different AMTA events. Syracuse in April, Texas in April, AMTA Florida in June, National in August, and Seattle in October. So that seems really wonderful, and I'm so proud and thrilled to be able to do that and honored.
Yes. Do you know what you'll be providing at National in Dallas this year?
Yes, so they've asked me to do a 4 hour extremities and a 4 hour dynamics of the breath.
Okay. So far, you're the only person that I've actually studied under that's been on this podcast. So I will highly encourage people to consider signing up for that. It was
Great.
great the time that I learned from you, Pete.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a great time at the school summit too.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me do this, and I'm just thrilled to support you all.
Well, Pete, I do want to thank you for joining us on this podcast, and you've been just so generous. So thank you.
Be well. Best to all of you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider donating to the Society of Massage Archives so we can continue to bring you this episode and other resources to fulfill our mission of preserving and integrating the historical knowledge of massage therapy's professional advocacy and traditional techniques to guide and enrich our contemporary practices. Thank you. You have been listening to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives. You can learn more about the Society at societyofmassagearchives.org. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. Do you know someone whose hands have helped shape the practice of massage? If you or someone you know would make a great guest for future episodes of this podcast, please email the Society at societyofmassagearchives@gmail.com. Society of Massage Archives, all one word, @gmail.com.